On June 23, 2007, four friends departed from Uruapan, Michoacan, on their motorcycles heading towards the beaches of Colima. They were supposed to arrive that same afternoon. They never arrived. For 5 years, the only clue authorities found was a black leather jacket hooked on a mesquite tree, 30 kilometers from where they were last seen. But what was discovered inside that jacket would forever change the perception of what truly happened to Paloma Contreras, Beatriz Ramos, Leticia Salinas, and Adriana Campos. How is it possible for four adult, experienced motorcyclists to simply vanish on a road they knew like the back of their hand? Before continuing with this disturbing story, if you appreciate real mysterious cases like this, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss any new cases. Also, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We're curious to know where our community is spread around the world. Now, let's discover how it all began. Uruapan, located in the heart of Michoacan, was in 2007 a city of just over 300,000 inhabitants, known for its avocado production and temperate climate. The cobblestone streets of the historic downtown, contrasted with the more modern avenues where auto repair shops, spare parts stores, and small family businesses flourished. It was in one of these shops, Modos y Refacciones El Aguila, where the four protagonists of this story met. Paloma Contreras, 28 years old, was the lead mechanic of the shop. She had learned the trade from her father, who passed away when she was only 20, leaving her the family business. With her black hair always tied in a high ponytail and her hands permanently stained with grease, Paloma had earned a solid reputation in the city for her ability to diagnose mechanical issues that others couldn't solve. She rode a 1998 Yamaha XJ600 in navy blue, which she had completely restored by herself. Beatriz Ramos, 31 years old, worked as a nurse at the Uruapan General Hospital. She was a meticulous, perfectionist woman who found in motorcycles a way to relieve the stress of her night shifts. Her 2003 Honda CB500, impeccably maintained, reflected her orderly personality. Beatriz was the one who always planned their trips, studying maps for hours and checking weather conditions. Leticia Salinas, 26 years old, was the most adventurous of the group. She worked as a freelance photographer for the local newspaper and several travel magazines. Her 2005 Suzuki GSX-R 600 in bright red was as vibrant as her personality. Leticia had traveled extensively through central Mexico, documenting local festivals and natural landscapes. She always carried her Canon EOS 350D digital camera, which she had bought with her savings 6 months prior. Adriana Campos, 29 years old, was a physical education teacher at a local high school. She started riding a motorcycle after her divorce 2 years earlier as a way to rebuild her independence. Her 2006 green Kawasaki Ninja was the newest in the group. Adriana was always the one concerned with safety, insisting that everyone wear approved helmets and full protective gear. The four of them had gradually met at Paloma's workshop between 2005 and 2006. Beatriz was the first to arrive, looking for someone who could keep her bike in perfect condition for her weekend trips. Leticia arrived later, needing special modifications on her Suzuki to safely carry her photography equipment. Adriana was the last to join the group when she bought her used Kawasaki and needed adjustments for her height. What started as a business relationship gradually turned into a strong friendship. The four of them shared not only a passion for motorcycles, but also a sense of freedom they found on the roads of Michoacan. Every month, they organized at least one trip, exploring different routes that took them from the mountains to the coast. In 2007, the region had been experiencing growing social tension. Drug cartels began to fight over territories in Michoacan, and although Uruapan remained relatively calm, the roads connecting to other states began to show signs of the violence that would plague the region in the years to come. However, the four friends had traveled that same route to Colima on 3 previous occasions without any incident. On Friday, June 22, 2007, Paloma closed the shop earlier than usual. At 4:30 p.m., the four friends met in the back parking lot for a final inspection of their motorcycles before the trip the next day. It was a routine they had developed, checking oil levels, tire pressure, brakes, and fuel. Beatrice, with her characteristic meticulousness, had prepared a checklist that they followed religiously. Letitia arrived with her camera already mounted on the gas tank, protected by a waterproof cover she had designed specifically. She had researched some cliffs near Manzanillo that she wanted to photograph for an article about lesser-known destinations on the Mexican coast. Adriana brought updated maps she had gotten at a Pemex gas station, marked with the planned stops and emergency phone numbers. The plan was simple. Leave at 8 a.m. on Saturday, June 23rd. Take Federal Highway 37 toward Colima, stop for lunch in the city of Colima, and arrive in Manzanillo before 3 p.m. They had booked rooms in a budget hotel near the beach and planned to return on Sunday afternoon. That night, each followed their usual routine. Paloma had dinner with her mother, Rosa Contreras, at their family home, where they still lived together. She told her about the trip and promised to call her when she arrived in Manzanillo, as she always did. Beatrice finished her shift at the hospital at 6 a.m. on Saturday and slept for 3 hours before preparing for the trip. Letitia spent the night organizing her photography gear and charging extra batteries. Adriana packed a backpack with first aid supplies and basic tools, a constant contribution to the group. Saturday, June 23rd, dawned clear, Uruapan. The temperature at 8 a.m. was 18 degrees Celsius, ideal for motorcycle travel. The four friends met punctually at Paloma's shop. They were all dressed in denim pants, sturdy boots, and leather jackets. Beatrice wore a black jacket from Alpinesters, which she had bought in Guadalajara 6 months earlier. Paloma wore a brown leather jacket that had belonged to her father. Letitia wore a red jacket that matched her motorcycle, and Adriana wore an olive green jacket that she had specifically bought to match her Kawasaki. At 8:15 a.m., after verifying once more that everyone had their IDs, cash, and emergency contact numbers, the group departed from the shop. The last image of them is from a security camera at a gas station on the outskirts of Uruapan, where they stopped at 8:32 a.m. to fill up their tanks. In the grainy but clear video, the four women can be seen chatting animatedly while refueling. Paloma pays in cash and tucks the receipt into the right pocket of her jacket. The route they took was familiar to them. They left Uruapan via Lazaro Cardenas Avenue, took the state road toward Paitsingan, and from there connected to Federal Highway 37, which would take them directly to Colima. It was a route of approximately 280 kilometers that they had traveled on. Previous trips without any problems. The first point of concern arose at 2:30 p.m. when Adriana didn't call her younger sister, Claudia Campos, as she had promised to do from Colima. Claudia waited until 4 p.m. before trying to call Adriana's cell phone, but the call went straight to voicemail. Worried, but not overly alarmed, Claudia decided to wait until the evening dot at 7 p.m. Rosa Contreras, Paloma's mother, began to seriously worry. Paloma never missed a call when she arrived at a destination, and her phone was also going straight to voicemail. Rosa called the hospital where Beatrice worked, and they confirmed that she had left as scheduled. She tried to reach Letitia and Adriana, but neither responded. At 9 p.m., Claudia Campos arrived at Rosa Contreras' house. Together, they decided to wait until the next morning before alerting the authorities, assuming that perhaps there had been some mechanical issue, or that they had decided to stay an extra night on Sunday, June 24th, when none of the four had returned or made contact. Rosa and Claudia went to the Uruapan Public Ministry office at 10 a.m. to report the disappearance. The on-duty officer, Esteban Nones, took the report but explained that since they were adults, they would need to wait 72 hours before initiating an official search. However, the persistence of the families and the fact that all four had disappeared simultaneously convinced Officer Nones to initiate preliminary investigations. He contacted the authorities in Colima and Manzanillo to verify if the women had arrived at their destinations. The hotel in Manzanillo confirmed that the reserved rooms had never been occupied. The first few days after the disappearance were filled with frantic activity. The Michoacan Ministerial Police, coordinated by Commander Ismael Paredes, organized search groups that combed Federal Highway 37 from Uruapan to Colima. Officers from both states, as well as civilian volunteers who knew the missing women, participated. Paloma's workshop became an improvised operations center. Rosa Contreras kept the business open while coordinating with the authorities and organizing volunteers. Dozens of motorcyclists from the region joined the searches, covering not only the main route, but also secondary roads and paths that the women might have taken for some reason. Claudia Campos requested a leave of absence from her job as a secretary at the municipal hall to dedicate herself full-time to the search for her sister. She printed thousands of flyers with photos of the four women and distributed them at gas stations, mechanic shops, hotels, and restaurants along the route to Colima. During the first 2 weeks, several leads emerged that turned out to be false. A truck driver reported seeing four motorcyclists stopped on the shoulder near Apatsangan around noon on June 23rd, but when investigators checked the area, they found no evidence. A mechanic in Tacoma, Colima, claimed that four women had passed by his shop seeking repairs, but the dates didn't match, and the descriptions of the motorcycles were completely different. Commander Paredes established an investigation protocol that included interviews with family members, friends, and acquaintances of the missing women. During these interviews, a concerning pattern emerged. None of the four had mentioned personal problems, threats, or situations that could explain a voluntary disappearance. The investigation revealed that Paloma had savings of approximately 45,000 pesos in a bank account that had not been touched. Beatriz was scheduled to work the night shift on Monday, June 25th, and had left her uniform clean and ironed in her apartment. Leticia had a pending appointment with a magazine editor for Thursday, June 28th, regarding an important photography project. Adriana had bought tickets for a concert in Morelia for the following weekend. All these details pointed to the fact that the four women had planned to return and continue with their normal lives. The theory of a voluntary disappearance began to lose strength as weeks passed without any contact. A month after the disappearance, on July 23, 2007, the families organized a peaceful demonstration in the Zocalo of Uruapan to keep the case in the public eye. Approximately 200 people participated, including co-workers, friends, and other motorcyclists. The demonstration was covered by local media and some national outlets, amplifying the search. The media coverage attracted the attention of civil organizations specializing in disappearances. Familias Unidas de Michoacan, a non-governmental organization, offered legal and psychological support to the families. Through this organization, the families learned about legal procedures and gained access to resources they hadn't known about before. During the second month, the investigation expanded to include the possibility that the women had been victims of a criminal group. In 2007, although drug-related violence in Michoacan had not yet reached the levels it would in later years, there had already been reports of kidnappings on state roads. However, no ransom demand came in, which baffled investigators. Rosa Contreras developed an obsessive routine of staying informed about all aspects of the investigation. Every morning, Rosa Contreras would call Commander Paredes to ask for updates. Every afternoon, she would visit Paloma's workshop, which was kept exactly as her daughter had left it. Regular customers began taking their motorcycles to other workshops, but Rosa refused to touch the tools or move anything from Paloma's work area. Claudia Campos developed chronic insomnia and lost 12 kilograms during the first 3 months. Her doctor prescribed anti-anxiety medication, but she refused to take it, arguing that she needed to stay alert in case any lead about Adriana came up. She began to frequent online forums about missing persons, establishing contact with families. In similar situations across Mexico, the third month marked a turning point in the investigation. Systematic searches were reduced to sporadic operations, and Commander Paredes was reassigned to other more recent cases. A new investigator, Detective Osvaldo Ugalde, took on the case as part of a file of unsolved disappearances. Ugalde was a seasoned investigator with 15 years of experience in complex cases. His approach was different from Paredes. Instead of focusing on finding the women alive, he began investigating the possibility that they had died and their bodies were hidden somewhere along the route. This new perspective, though painful for the families, opened investigative lines that hadn't been explored before. The discovery that would change everything happened on September 14, 2012, 5 years and 3 months after the disappearance. That year's drought had been particularly severe in Michoacán, lowering the levels of rivers and streams to historic lows. The rains of July and August had been insufficient, and much of the region's vegetation was dry and yellowed. Aurelio Sandoval, a 54-year-old rancher living in a small village called El Mesquite, about 30 kilometers southwest of Uruapan, was repairing a fence that marked the boundary of his property with an abandoned communal land. The fence had been damaged by cattle during their desperate search for water in the previous week's drought while driving new posts near a centuries-old mesquite tree that served as a reference point for the property limits. Aurelio noticed something unusual hooked on a high branch. At first, he thought it was garbage blown there by the wind during a storm, but when he got closer, he could distinguish that it was a piece of clothing. Aurelio was a practical man, not one for dramatics, but something about the black jacket, hanging 3 meters off the ground, unsettled him. There were no accessible roads near the tree, and the branch where it was caught was too high for someone to have deliberately placed it there by walking. The only logical explanation was that it had been blown there by a very strong wind or some other force. Using a ladder from his truck for repair work, Aurelio climbed the tree and retrieved the jacket. It was a black leather motorcycle jacket, brand Alpinesters, medium size for a woman. It was weathered from 5 years of exposure, but still recognizable. More importantly, inside the pocket, he found a nurse's ID from the General Hospital of Uruapan, bearing the name Beatriz Ramos. Aurelio vaguely knew the story of the 4 missing motorcyclists. A case had been widely publicized in the region, and although he lived relatively isolated, he had seen the flyers and posters the families had distributed over the years. The ID immediately confirmed his suspicions about the importance of his find. Instead of touching the jacket further or looking for other evidence himself, Aurelio had the presence of mind to contact the authorities immediately. He called the emergency number 066 from his cell phone and reported the discovery. The operator, initially skeptical due to the number of false reports they had received about the case over the years, changed his tone when Aurelio mentioned the specific ID. At 2:45 p.m. on the same day, a unit from the ministerial police arrived at Aurelio's ranch. Detective Ugalde, who had kept the case active in his personal files even after it was officially archived due to lack of evidence, personally went to the scene of the discovery. Ugalde meticulously documented the scene. He took photographs of the tree from multiple angles, measured the exact height where the jacket was caught, and recorded the conditions of the surrounding terrain. The jacket was carefully bagged and tagged as evidence, following strict forensic protocols. What intrigued Ugaldi the most was the location of the find. The tree was approximately 800 meters from the nearest federal highway in rough terrain, full of thorny vegetation. There were no visible paths leading from the highway to the tree. For the jacket to get there, someone would have had to deliberately walk through difficult terrain, or it would have had to be dragged by considerable force. During the initial inspection of the area, Ugaldi noticed something else. Fragments of black plastic partially buried in the ground near the tree. The fragments appeared to be from heavy-duty trash bags, the type used in construction or gardening. This observation was carefully noted in his report, although at the time he didn't fully understand its significance. The news of the jacket discovery quickly spread through Uruapan and the surrounding region. Rosa Contreras received the call from Detective Ugaldi at 5:30 p.m. on September 14th. The confirmation that the jacket belonged to Beatriz Ramos was met with a mix of relief and terror. There was finally concrete evidence of what had happened to the women, but that evidence suggested a tragic fate. Claudia Campos arrived at the discovery site, accompanied by Rosa and several members of Familias Unidas de Michoacán. The organization had stayed in regular contact with the families during the 5 years that had passed, and its regional coordinator, Graciela Ibarra, had experience dealing with this kind of discovery. The presence of the families at the scene of the find created an emotionally intense situation. Rosa Contreras, who had maintained a stoic composure for years, collapsed when she saw the tree where Beatriz's jacket had been. The reality that her daughters might be dead, a possibility she had systematically denied for 5 years, became inevitable. Ugaldi explained to the families that the discovery of the jacket was just the beginning of a new phase in the investigation. His experience told him that when a piece of clothing appeared after such a long time, there was likely more evidence in the area. However, he also warned that the search would be slow and meticulous, and they might find things that would be very difficult to process emotionally. The new search began at dawn on September 15th, 2012. A specialized search team from the state government, equipped with metal detectors and trained dogs, arrived at the site. The search perimeter was set within a 2 kilometers radius around the tree where the jacket had been found. During the first day of the systematic search, the teams found several interesting objects. About 150 meters from the tree, buried under 20 centimeters of earth and decomposing leaves, they found fragments of a red motorcycle helmet. The helmet had been crushed with considerable force, to the point that it was impossible to determine the make or model. Even more unsettling was the discovery on the second day of search, where they found metal pieces that appeared to belong to motorcycles. The fragments included parts of a rearview mirror, pieces of plastic fairings in various colors, and what appeared to be part of a fuel tank with evidence of being deliberately punctured. Detective Ugaldi began to develop a theory about what might have happened. The objects found were scattered over a relatively large area, but they followed a pattern that suggested they had been buried or hidden systematically. The distribution was not random, as it would have been if they had been dragged by nature. Over the years, on the third day of the search, September 17th, the most significant discovery was made. At 11:20 a.m., one of the specialized dogs alerted to a specific area near a small dry creek. After digging carefully, investigators found a Canon EOS 350 digital camera buried in a plastic bag. The camera was in surprisingly good condition, considering the years of burial. The memory card was intact, and although the camera had suffered damage from moisture, the forensic technicians believed it was possible to recover at least part of the information stored on the card. Rosa Contreras immediately recognized the camera as belonging to Leticia Salinas. Leticia had proudly shown the camera to all her friends when she bought it and had taken hundreds of photographs during her motorcycle trips. If the photos on the memory card could be recovered, they could provide crucial information about the last moments of the four women. The data recovery process took place at the Michoacan State Attorney General's Office Laboratory in Morelia. The specialized technicians worked for 3 days to extract the information from the damaged card. On September 20th, Ugalde received a call informing him that they had managed to recover 27 partially damaged but recognizable photographs. The photographs told a story no one expected. The first images showed the four women on their trip, smiling and posing next to their motorcycles at various stops along the road. There were photos taken at the gas station where they were last seen, images of the Michoacan landscape, and several photographs of the motorcycles in motion, taken from one of the bikes. But the last 6 photographs were completely different. They had been taken in what appeared to be a clearing in the forest, under low light conditions that suggested either dusk or dawn. In these images, part of a white pickup truck could be seen, along with several human figures that were not clearly distinguished due to the image quality. The women's motorcycles appeared to be stacked haphazardly. The most unsettling photograph was the last in the sequence, which showed part of what seemed to be a hole dug in the ground, with construction tools visible at the edge. The image was blurry and cropped, as if it had been taken hastily or while the camera was moving. The photographs recovered from Leticia Salinas' camera completely changed the direction of the investigation. Detective Ugalde requested the collaboration of federal image analysis experts to examine every detail of the photographs. The specialists used advanced software to enhance the image quality and extract information that wasn't visible at first glance. The analysis revealed crucial details that had been overlooked during the initial review. In the background of one of the photos, a vehicle plate was partially visible. Although only 3 digits and 1 letter were visible, it was enough for investigators to begin searching the vehicle registration databases in Michoacan and neighboring states. More importantly, the analysis of the shadows and the position of the sun in the photos allowed experts to determine that they had been taken between 6:30 and 7:15 p.m. on June 23, 2007. This meant that the women had arrived alive at their final destination, many hours after their last confirmed sighting at the Uruapan gas station. The search for the white pickup truck that appeared in the photographs became the main priority of the investigation. The visible fragments of the plate were enough to narrow down the possibilities to approximately 200 vehicles in the region. Ugalde organized teams to locate and verify each of these vehicles. On September 28, 2012, one of the investigation teams located a 2004 white Ford F-150 pickup truck on a ranch outside of Pettington. The truck was registered in the name of Fabricio Velasco, a 45-year-old man who worked as an independent transporter. When the investigators arrived at the ranch, they found the truck abandoned and partially dismantled. Fabricio Velasco had disappeared 3 years earlier, in 2009, according to his neighbors. His family had assumed he had migrated to the United States in search of better job opportunities, a common situation in the region. However, the appearance of his truck in Leticia's photographs suggested a much darker connection. The investigation into Velasco revealed that in 2007, he had been arrested twice for possession of small amounts of marijuana, but had never been processed for any serious crimes. He worked transporting goods between Michoacan and Colima, exactly the route the 4 motorcyclists had taken. His neighbors described him as reserved but not problematic. On October 2nd, while investigators were reviewing Velasco's abandoned property, they made a discovery that connected all the elements of the case. In a dilapidated barn behind the main house, they found tools that matched those shown in the last photograph from Leticia's camera shovels. picks, and a wheelbarrow with traces of dry dirt. Even more significant, on the cement floor of the barn, they found stains that preliminary tests suggested could be human blood. They also found leather fibers that were consistent with the jackets worn by the motorcyclists and black plastic fragments identical to those found near the tree where Beatrice's jacket had been found. The reconstruction of the events began to take shape. Uzgaldi developed the theory that Velasco had intercepted the women at some point along the road, possibly pretending to have an emergency or need of help. The motorcyclists, known for their solidarity and willingness to assist fellow motorcyclists in trouble, had likely stopped voluntarily. On October 5th, the investigators found the final link that would confirm their suspicions. In a police file, they discovered that Fabricio Velasco had been briefly questioned in July 2007 as part of the initial investigation into the missing motorcyclists. At the time, he had provided an alibi that was never fully verified due to the lack of resources and the number of people who were questioned. According to the 2007 report, Velasco claimed to have been in Colima on June 23rd, delivering a shipment of avocados to a local distributor. However, when investigators contacted the distributor in 2012, the man had already died, and his records from 2007 had been destroyed in a fire 3 years prior. The intensive search of Velasco's property continued for another week. On October 12th, using ground-penetrating radar, the investigators identified several areas where the earth had been disturbed years ago. Excavating these areas revealed fragmented human remains buried at different depths. Preliminary forensic analysis suggested that the remains belonged to multiple individuals, but the state of decomposition and fragmentation made immediate identification impossible. The samples were sent to the federal government's Forensic Genetics Laboratory for DNA testing, which would take several weeks to complete. On November 3, 2012, the results of the DNA tests confirmed what the families had feared for over 5 years. The remains found on Fabricio Velasco's property belonged to Paloma Contreras, Beatriz Ramos, Leticia Salinas, and Adriana Campos. The 4 women had been murdered on the same day they disappeared. The forensic reconstruction of the events, based on physical evidence and the recovered photographs, painted a devastating picture of what had occurred on June 23, 2007. According to the investigators, Velasco had intercepted the women around 2 p.m., likely at a desolate stretch of road where he had pretended to have mechanical problems with his truck. The motorcyclists, following their nature of solidarity, had stopped to offer help. Velasco had forced them to accompany him to his property, where he held them captive for several hours. The photographs from Leticia suggested that she had managed to document part of what was happening, possibly hoping the images would be found later. The analysis of the skeletal remains revealed that all 4 women had suffered significant trauma before dying. Forensic experts determined that they had been killed with blunt instruments, probably the same ones found in Velasco's barn. Their bodies had been dismembered and buried in separate locations on the property. The motorcycles had been systematically dismantled. The valuable parts had likely been sold in the black market for spare parts, while the identifiable parts had been destroyed and scattered. Some fragments were buried on Velasco's property, while others, like Beatrice's jacket, had been transported to distant locations to avoid discovery. The investigation into Fabricio Velasco revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior that had gone unnoticed for years. Investigators discovered that between 2006 and 2009, at least 6 other people had disappeared under similar circumstances along routes that Velasco frequently traveled for his transport work. Among the victims were 2 university students traveling by motorcycle from Guadalajara to the coast, a merchant from Apatzingán transporting goods in his personal vehicle, and a couple of foreign tourists who had rented motorcycles in Puerto Vallarta. The modus operandi was consistent in all the cases. Velasco would identify victims traveling alone or in small groups, fake mechanical emergencies to intercept them, and then take them to his property, where he would kill them and steal their belongings. Retrospective investigations revealed that Velasco had developed a network of contacts in motorcycle repair shops and spare parts stores that bought the stolen parts without asking questions, although it was never possible to determine exactly what happened to Velasco after 2009. Investigators theorized that he had been killed by criminal associates with whom he had conflicts, possibly related to drug trafficking or territorial disputes. Testimonies from neighbors suggested that Velasco had started working for drug cartels that used his transport business as a front to move illicit substances. Detective Ugalde speculated that Velasco might have tried to steal a drug shipment or money, which would have sealed his fate. His disappearance in 2009 coincided with the period of greatest violence between cartels in Michoacán, when territorial disputes were often resolved with summary executions. The news of the case's closure was received with mixed feelings by the families. Rosa Contreras expressed relief at finally knowing the truth about what had happened to Paloma, but also a deep sadness at the confirmation that her daughter had suffered before dying. In an interview with local media, Rosa said, "For 5 years, I lived with the hope that Paloma was alive somewhere, that maybe she had lost her memory or that someone had kidnapped her. Knowing the truth is terrible, but at least now I can say goodbye to her properly." Claudia Campos expressed satisfaction that the truth had been discovered, but also frustration that Velasco would never face justice for his crimes. "My sister Adriana was a strong, independent woman who had rebuilt her life after her divorce. Knowing that she died helping someone who pretended to need help is heartbreaking, but it also reflects the generous person she was," Claudia stated. During a press conference, the authorities organized a ceremony for the return of the remains on November 15, 2012. The 4 women were buried in a joint ceremony at the Fo Municipal Cemetery in Uruapan, with more than 500 people who had participated in the search over the previous years in attendance. The ceremony included motorcyclists from all over central Mexico, who formed an honor caravan that accompanied the coffins from the church to the cemetery. During the ceremony, Father Miguel Castillo, who had known the 4 women and had officiated Adriana's wedding years before, offered a reflection on the importance of community and solidarity. These 4 women died precisely because of the qualities that made them special: their willingness to help others, their bravery, their adventurous spirit. We cannot allow the evil that destroyed them to also destroy these values in us. The case of the 4 motorcyclists became a reference point for missing persons investigations in Michoacán and throughout Mexico. The techniques used to recover the photographs from Leticia's camera were adopted as a standard protocol for similar cases nationwide. The federal government's Forensic Science Laboratory developed new procedures for recovering data from damaged electronic devices based on the methods that had been successful in this case. Detective Ugalde's persistence was recognized with a special award from the state government, and his methodology was included in the training manual for investigators from the Michoacán Attorney General's office. Ugalde was later promoted to Regional Coordinator of Missing Persons Investigations, a position created specifically to apply the lessons learned from this case to other investigations. The impact of the case extended beyond the police realm. The Michoacán Public Security Secretariat implemented new patrol protocols for rural roads, including regular checks on abandoned vehicles and rapid response to reports of motorcyclists in distress. Communication points were established every 50 kilometers along major tourist routes, equipped with emergency phones and GPS systems. Rosa Contreras decided to keep Paloma's motorcycle workshop open, but transformed it entirely. Working with Familias Unidas de Michoacán and with the support of the municipal government, The workshop became the Centro de Apoyo Paloma Contreras, a place where families of missing persons could receive free legal advice, psychological support, and guidance on search procedures. The center also became an informal archive for disappearance cases in the region. Rosa kept detailed files of every case that came to her attention, including photographs, descriptions, and any information that could be useful for future investigations. Her volunteer work was recognized by international human rights organizations, and the center received funding from both governmental and non-governmental agencies. Claudia Campos returned to her job at the municipal government, but also became actively involved in civil society. She used her personal experience and knowledge of administrative procedures to help other families facing similar situations, navigating the government bureaucracy and ensuring that cases were properly documented. In 2014, Claudia was elected to the board of directors of Familias Unidas de Michoacán, where she implemented a computerized tracking system for missing persons cases that was later adopted by similar organizations in other states. Her work contributed to the creation of a national database that facilitated the identification of patterns in disappearances and coordination between different jurisdictions. The case also had a significant impact on the Mexican motorcycle community. Motorcycle associations implemented new safety protocols for group trips, including constant communication systems, predetermined routes with checkpoints, and specific procedures to help other motorcyclists in distress without putting themselves at risk. An annual memorial was established in honor of the 4 women, celebrated every June 23rd with a motorcycle ride from Uruapan to Manzanillo, following the route they had planned to take. The event, known as Rodada por la Memoria, Ride for Memory, attracts hundreds of motorcyclists each year and raises funds for the Centro de Apoyo Paloma Contreras and other organizations that work with families of missing persons. In 2015, 3 years after the case was resolved, the story of the 4 motorcyclists was documented in a book written by investigative journalist Rodrigo Medina, titled La Última Fotografía, El Caso de los Motociclistas de Uruapan. The book became a national bestseller and brought the case to international attention, inspiring changes in missing persons investigation protocols in several Latin American countries. The National Commission for the Search of Missing Persons used the case as an example in their training programs, highlighting the importance of family persistence, interinstitutional coordination, and the use of advanced forensic technology. The case became a required study in police academies in several Mexican states. 10 years after the case was resolved, in 2022, the Universidad Michoacana de San Nicolás de Hidalgo established the Becanas Scholarship for Photography and Journalism. Students specializing in social investigation. The scholarship was funded through contributions from the investigations from the motorcycling community and honors Letitia's bravery in documenting the events that led to her death. The legacy of Paloma, Beatriz, Letitia, and Adriana transcends the tragedy of their deaths. Their case demonstrated that the truth can be uncovered even years after the events, that the persistence of families is crucial in the search for justice, and that technology can be a powerful tool in solving crimes that seem impossible to resolve. More importantly, their story served as a catalyst for systemic improvements in how Mexico addresses missing persons cases, setting precedents that have benefited thousands of families facing similar situations. This extraordinary case teaches U.S. multiple profound lessons about human nature, the importance of perseverance, and the power of technology to reveal hidden truths. The story of Paloma, Beatriz, Letitia, and Adriana is a devastating testimony of how human kindness can be exploited by unscrupulous individuals. But it is also a powerful demonstration of how family love and professional dedication can triumph over the darkest evil. Did you notice how every small detail in this story was crucial to solving the case? Letitia's decision to always carry her camera, Beatrice's meticulousness in keeping her ID in the inner pocket of her jacket, the exceptional drought of 2012 that allowed Aurelio Sandoval to find the jacket, and even Rosa Contreras' persistence in keeping the case alive for 5 years. Do you think any of these elements were coincidences? Or do they show that the truth, no matter how long it takes, always finds a way to come to light? Letitia's bravery in documenting her last moments is something that deeply impacts me every time I review this case. In her final moments, when anyone would be paralyzed by terror, she had the presence of mind and courage to create evidence that would eventually lead to justice. What kind of inner strength is required to act like that under extreme pressure? Do you think you would have had that same presence of mind? But I also wonder how many similar cases remain unsolved because we didn't have the luck of finding that crucial evidence? How many families are still waiting for answers that could be buried somewhere, waiting for the right conditions to bring them to light? This case reminds us that every missing person has a story, a family that is searching for them, and evidence that could be waiting to be discovered. Detective Ugaldi's work also teaches us something fundamental about criminal investigation. Never completely give up. When the case was officially filed away, he continued working on it unofficially. How many investigators would do the same today? What motivates them to keep searching for the truth, even when the system has abandoned them? And let's talk about the most disturbing aspect of this story. Fabricio Velasco was not an obvious criminal. He was an independent truck driver, someone who moved freely along the roads, who knew the routes, and who knew exactly where to intercept his victims. This makes us wonder how many seemingly normal people in our communities could be hiding similar secrets. How can we protect ourselves without becoming paranoid or losing our ability to trust others? The dilemma is real. The 4 motorcyclists died precisely for being good people, for having the willingness to help someone in trouble. Should this tragedy make us more cautious, more distrustful? Or should it inspire us to be more vigilant, but without losing our humanity? How do we find the balance between personal safety and human solidarity? I am also very interested in your opinions on the technological aspect of the case. Letitia's photographs were the key to solving everything, but they were buried for 5 years. What other digital evidence could be waiting to be discovered in similar cases? With current technology, do you think this case would have been solved faster? Or are there aspects of traditional investigation that technology will never be able to replace? I also want you to reflect on the impact on the families. Rosa Contreras turned her pain into action, creating a support center that has helped hundreds of other families. Claudia Campos channeled her traumatic experience into constructive activism. How do people find meaning and purpose after such devastating tragedies? What does this teach us about human resilience? The case also raises important questions about road safety in Mexico. In 2007, drug cartel violence was escalating, but cases like this remind us that danger doesn't always come from where we expect. How have the safety conditions for travelers in Mexico changed since then? What additional measures should we take when traveling on rural roads? Another reflection that arises is about community. The response of Euroepen to the case was extraordinary. Hundreds of people participated in the searches. Local media kept the case in the public eye, and civil organizations provided constant support to the families. What characteristics should a community have to respond like this in the face of tragedy? How can we foster this kind of solidarity in our own communities? And finally, I want you to think about the legacy of these 4 women. Paloma, the dedicated mechanic who inherited her father's business. Beatrice, the nurse who found freedom on the roads after her night shift saving lives. Letitia, the adventurous photographer who documented the beauty of Mexico. Adriana, the teacher who had rebuilt her independence after her divorce. Each of them had dreams, plans, and people who depended on them. Their death was an immense loss, but how can we honor their memory beyond simply remembering their tragedy? The changes their case inspired in investigation protocols, the educational scholarships established in their honor, the support center, named after Paloma, the annual Regatta por la Memoria, Ride for Memory. These are all examples of how tragedy can be transformed into a force for positive change. What other ways could we honor the victims of similar crimes? I'd love to read your reflections in the comments. What aspect of this story impacted you the most? What lessons do you think we can take into our own lives? Do you know of similar cases in your regions that had unexpected resolutions years later? If this in-depth investigation moved you as much as it did me, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss future stories. We have an amazing community of people interested in justice and truth. And each new subscriber strengthens our ability to investigate and share important cases like this one. Leave a like if this story emotionally marked you, and please share the video with people you think would appreciate this type of deep investigation. Every share helps keep the memory of victims like Paloma, Beatrice, Letitia, and Adriana alive, and contributes to raising awareness about the importance of never giving up in the search for the truth. Also invite you to visit the description of the video, where I've included links to organizations that work with families of missing persons. If you know someone who is going through a similar situation, these resources could be invaluable. Sometimes, simply knowing that they are not alone can make a huge difference in their lives. Remember, every missing person has a story that deserves to be told, a family that deserves answers, and a truth that deserves to be uncovered. The memory of these 4 brave women lives through stories like this, which remind us that even in the darkest moments, the light of truth can find a way to shine. I'll see you in the next video, where we'll continue exploring cases that prove that justice, though sometimes late, is never impossible to achieve. Until then, take care and never stop believing in the power of truth.